I was thinking about what the problem is in our world because of Sanctity of Life and because of, Roe versus Wade, and that's a problem. It's just terrible legislation. When you stop and think about it, when you analyze it, you just look at it, and you don't have to be pro-life to look at the law and say that's an ignorant law. You don't have to. I mean, that's a self-serving, bad piece of legislation for sure. And you can not know God and look at it and decide that is not smart. And yet it stays. Why does it stay? It stays because we're self-centered, we're selfish. So I wrote this down. I've been working on it. And I think here's the problem today. Most intelligent people are filled with doubt, while most of the stupid people are filled with confidence. The media is generally dishonest and won't tell the truth, and the Christian church, for the most part, remains silent in the face of America's moral crisis. That's what's gone wrong. Things are a wreck, and yet we're starting to see some change. We're starting to see some things. So I want to take you to, and this is going to be a little bit of preaching and a little bit of civics class. You remember civics class? That's that class they don't teach anymore in high school. But civics was my favorite class because it taught you how the government works. It taught you about the Constitution. It talked to you about how things are ordered and why they are the way they are. And we don't do that anymore. I had a great experience in civics. I remember my teacher was a devout communist. That's okay. I grew up in California, foreign country. And so you could have that kind of teacher. And he was the only one that really got me thinking, because he would come in and he would read the material and then he would tell us why it was wrong. And then he would start talking about communism. And it allowed us to think. It allowed us to fight back. And got a terrible grade in that class, but I fought the whole time. And it was awesome. And I learned more about civics than I would have learned because I was in the book. I was reading about it. And for the first time, really, in my high school career, I really followed through on all the assignments because I didn't want to go in there without knowing. And I think part of the reason why many times we don't speak out is because we don't think we know some things. So I'm going to share some things that might help you. The equal protection under the 14th Amendment is a big deal. When the architects of the Constitution wrote the 14th Amendment, they had the unborn in mind as well as everybody else that it applies to. And so what you have in the 14th Amendment, it is the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment is one of the most litigated sections of the Constitution. As a brief overview, the clause refers to the fact that all citizens of the United States are guaranteed equal protection under the laws of the United States. And when a statute or an ordinance discriminates against an individual or a class of individuals, and those individuals sue, the court will apply one of three levels of scrutiny. Thank you. To the law in question. So let me explain scrutiny to you, because there are three levels. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness would draw the largest scrutiny. When the Supreme Court get together, they are looking at somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 laws, and they pick about 2,000 and discuss those laws and write opinions and do all that. And so there is a rational basis. This is the lowest level of scrutiny that's imposed. Then there's the intermediate scrutiny, and this is an intermediate level of scrutiny imposed, typically used on laws which discriminate on the basis of gender, disability, and illegitimacy. Okay? Then the strict scrutiny, which is the highest level of scrutiny that can be imposed, and typically for laws which discriminate on the basis of race, national origin, allegiance, or religion, as well as laws which infringe on fundamental rights, gets the highest scrutiny. That's why the 14th Amendment should be pushed toward rescinding Roe versus Wade. Because you have a class of people that are being taken away. You have a class of people that aren't allowed to live, which is a class of American people. And if we're going to say liberty and justice for all, then it truly is liberty and justice for all. So why did we get messed up? The beginning of a national tragedy. How did it happen? Where did it come from? Whose wicked, bad idea was this? Roe versus Wade, the legal case in which the U.S. Supreme Court on January 22, 1973, what were you doing in January 22, 1973? You know what you were doing? Well, yeah, don't do that to me. Kelly looked at me and said, I was 5. I was waiting in line for gas, and so were you. Remember? And that's all we remember. And this law was passed. I don't even remember it. It passed by a 7-2 vote, and it unduly restricted the state's regulation of abortion. They said that it is unconstitutional. In a majority opinion written by Justice Harry A. Blackmun, the court held that a set of Texas statutes criminalized abortion in the most instances violated a woman's constitutional right to privacy, which it found to be implicit in the liberty guaranteed of the due process clause of the 14th Amendment. They got it wrong. Nor shall the state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. This is a horrible judgment. It's a judgment based on a political movement. If it was in 1973, if you took the science of birth and you showed it to the current Supreme Court, they would rescind this law immediately because the science can't back it up. In 73, if they had any kind of excuse, is they didn't know the science. So it's all about viability. And the reason why the law stands is because the argument on the other side is related to viability. And so that's why the heartbeat law came around. The heartbeat law came around, and they've done an interesting thing that has confounded now so far the court. In Mississippi and in Texas, they came up with the idea that an individual could sue any organization that would do an abortion. They could take them to court. And of course, the Supreme Court recognized that doesn't have anything to do with the government. And because the government is left out, they can't make a ruling on it. Problem now is they're being pressured around this law. And the heartbeat law probably is going to begin to fade out, but they're going to have to readdress the issue of Roe versus Wade. That's what the heartbeat law was designed to do. It's not designed to have a bunch of individuals sue a bunch of organizations for doing abortion. It is a legal gerrymandering to push forward the agenda to get rid of Roe versus Wade that is now celebrating their 49th anniversary. And so here we are, this many years later, with this horrible ruling, and it went 7-2. So it's not a good law by any stretch of the imagination. The United States passed a tragic landmark law in 2022 with its this tragic landmark law in 2022 with its 63 million abortions since Roe versus Wade. 63 million. Let that sink in for a minute. We're having problems at the border, right? Because everybody wants to come in. If 63 million more Americans were here, there was no room for anybody to come in. That's what it was intended to be. So you've created a problem in your world by doing away with 63 million people. The federal deficit is completely out of control, and it's out of control because what the government is supposed to do is a very small list of things, if you look at the Constitution. And they've gotten involved so heavily in our lives now that they don't know how to get out. 22% of Americans' income last year came from, guess where? The federal government. You don't think we're going to suffer now in terms of inflation because of that? And I would say it didn't come from the federal government. It came from me. It came from you, because we're going to pay taxes on April 15th. And that's where that money's coming from. It's coming from all of us, and it's going to affect us no matter who we are. So when we look at this, we say that America needs to be awakened to the consequences of that decision. So the National Right to Life is using the states that it says that there's been 459,781 abortions in the U.S. since the highest number of abortions took place in 1990, with an estimated of 1,608,600,000. That number slowly declined to 2021, when the U.S. experienced 677,000 deaths. Now, the media's not covering that, have you noticed? All of you can tell me how many pandemic deaths we've had lately, because they're covering that every day. Every day you get a new number, this many more people died. Why won't the media put up there, okay, today, this many children were aborted? They don't want to. And it's as though nobody wants to hear it. It's as though we want to run and hide. 3,000 people died when we were attacked in the Twin Towers. 3,000 Americans were just gone because of a terrorist attack. And boy, did we talk about that. Boy, did that make an impression. All of you can remember where you were, 9/11, 2001. You remember seeing it on the news. You remember seeing those towers just fall down, hit the ground in dust. And we talked about it, and we went after the enemy. Every day in America, without fail, one day after the next, after the next, after the next, 3,000 babies are aborted in America. The same amount of people we lost on 9/11, and nobody talks about it. No one. Everybody buries their head in the sand or gets excited because a woman has pro-choice. I remember when Al Gore was running for president, and he was at his convention, and he stood up, and he preached a really, really wonderful, tactical sermon, and it was almost totally about pro-choice. And he got applause after applause, standing ovation after standing ovation, because he had a good speech filled with rhetoric, filled with just nonsense about a woman's right to choose, and never mentioning that they were choosing death for the child.
What about the baby's right to choose?
That's a good one. Yeah, the baby has a right to choose in God's eyes, but not evidently in man's eyes. And you've heard it from Psalm 139. You've had it sung to you. The idea that God made us. He made our delicate inner parts of the body, and he knit me together in my mother's womb. And when you talk about viability, and you talk about when does life begin, because that was the big discussion. When does life begin? We need to make sure that there's no viability so we can pass this particular law. And if you understand the Bible, if you think in kingdom language and you understand what God is doing, then you understand viability is an eternity past with God. When did you begin? You began in the mind of God in eternity past. And then in your time, you had a time to be born and you have a time to die. But when God places you in the womb that is designed for you to live, that is the beginning of life. Scientifically so as well. Without doubt. You look at the science of it, you cannot deny it. And so Roe versus Wade simply exists to this day because people want to have the ability of convenience. And so in America, we're taking 3,000 lives a day so that the people can be able to do something else they want to do rather than parent a child. Or rather than give a child life and give it to somebody who is dying to parent it. Do you realize that Roe versus Wade has taken away just about every adoption agency we know anything about? I mean, there are adoption agencies that are going over to China and going over to different places around the world and drawing babies in, but there's no babies in America. They're gone. And they're gone because we're raising a generation who thinks, if I can't have the baby and keep it for myself, I'm not going to have it. That's what's so great about the church beginning pregnancy centers, and most of them started in 1990. That was the peak. That was the big number. And then they began to go down because littered through our communities, our crisis pregnancy centers. That's what they called them at first. Now they call them resource centers because we determined that having a baby is not a crisis. It's a privilege. And so the 14th Amendment should be the reason Roe versus Wade is changed, and because of the science and because of the viability. I tell you that Supreme Court justices, the ones that they had, if they would have seen the science of today, they never would have made this law. And here's the amazing thing. Our government now, the whole reason for Roe versus Wade, if you boil it all down to its actual source, it's that you have a choice of body autonomy. That means I get the choice of what I do to my body. Anybody get where I'm going? As the government now tells us, we all got to get vaccinated. If we all got to get vaccinated and the government wants to push that, then Roe versus Wade becomes even more ridiculous. And it is. And I'm not saying that it's wrong that the government is encouraging you to get a vaccine. What I'm saying is their argument doesn't hold up based on that. So that's why it's such a ridiculous law. So why does it stick around? By the way, most of America is pro-life. So you don't know that because of the way things are reported. Most of America believe in family. Most of America believe in morality. Most of America, the intelligent part of America, are filled with doubt, and they stop talking. It's like you're afraid to be politically incorrect. Go ahead and be politically incorrect. I'm trying to make an art out of it. So let me explain how it's working from the civil side. You have the Supreme Court. I got you a little picture of all of them. Some of you may not know all the Supreme Court justices. There they are. And I put them up there because I want you to pray for them. Now, Brewer is retiring, and he's a liberal judge. By the way, liberals have no problem with the justices. The ones that are liberal on the Supreme Court never disappoint. And Brewer is one of those. He's never disappointed the people that are politically pushing him along and backing him along, which is not what he should do as a Supreme Court judge. It's the absolute opposite. These people are put in there for life. They're put in there so they won't be under political pressure, and yet you got them on there and can't get them off for that reason. And President Biden has promised he would appoint a black woman to Brewer's position. And that's fine. I have no issue with that. None whatsoever. Ronald Reagan, when he went into the presidency, he promised us that he would put in a woman judge. And he didn't even look at anybody else. And I think it's kind of unfair to be critical of President Biden because he's made his choice known in that one of my litmus tests is that it's going to be a black woman. I'm totally okay with that. He's up front with that. But you know what the other part of the litmus test is? He won't pick one that isn't solidly pro-choice. They don't talk about that. But he's also promised that. That offends me. More importantly, it offends God. And it works against the Constitution of the United States. It weakens us morally and in every other way. So let me explain the division within the court, because for Roe versus Wade to go away, it has to go away by a vote of at least 5-4. And you hear all this stuff about, well, we're going to get all these judges. These judges are going to come on there, and we're going to assign the ones that we need to assign. We're going to get them on there. We're going to get Kavanaugh. We're going to get Barrett. We're going to get them on there, and they'll make the right decision, and we'll handle the court. And then you got filibusters going on to pack the court, and all this stuff's going on about the court. You got to know what all that means. We have to pay attention. This is not political. This is faith stuff. It's important for you to understand. Now, on the court right now, you have strict conservatives. They're constitutionalists is what they call themselves, and that's Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch. Okay? And they are constitutionalists. And that's just a word to identify them. And we identify them as conservative. They're not conservative. They're doing the job of being a Supreme Court justice the way it's supposed to be done. They are following the Constitution. And their makeup is such that they understand that the Constitution is the law of the land. And so they interpret what the Constitution says, and they decide on the legalities of what is given to them based on what the Constitution says. It's like you. You operate by faith by what your Bible says. You operate by faith by what you call true and what you know to be honest and fair and full of morality. And so that's the way they think. So anytime anything comes up, they're going to go strictly by the Constitution. And they've deemed that a conservative thought. And so what the media tries to do is they try to say, those are the conservatives. That's the evil bunch. If we just get rid of those guys. Well, that's who they are. Then you have institutionalists. And the institutionalists are there, and what they believe is they believe that bad laws can't be changed. See, they're more interested in the legacy of the court and their personal legacy than they are doing their job as a Supreme Court justice. And sometimes they will vote with a constitutionalist, and sometimes they will vote with the liberal. And that's the problem. There's three of them. And you can't figure out how they're going to jump. You can figure out how one of them's going to jump, Roberts. Roberts will do anything he can to protect his legacy on the court. And he does not want his legacy to be, I was one of the guys that voted against Roe versus Wade. He doesn't want to change anything. So if you're more interested in your legacy, that means that you can look at a bad law and see it and know it's bad and refuse to do anything about it. Where if you're really going to execute the job that you've been given as a Supreme Court justice, you should look at all the laws and look at the ones that were wrong and go back and correct those. And the 14th Amendment tells us over and over and over again to guard life, and we don't do it. So the individualists create that kind of problem. And then, of course, you have on the court three of those. You have Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. So if you're gonna change Roe versus Wade, you already got 3 votes, right? You got to get 2 more. You got to get 2 more, and Roberts is out. So it means that Kavanaugh and Barrett have to step up. Why am I telling you all that? So you can pray. So you can pray, you pray hard for them. Sotomayor is not going to step up. Give me a break. She's one of the liberals. Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan, they're going to go straight down the line. And Sotomayor said the other day, I'm not interested in rescinding Roe versus Wade. Its involvement itself is political. And if we rescind it, it's a political move. Let me tell you how stupid that is. That's so stupid that you go, are you really a judge? Because actually, if they rescind it, what happens is the legal part of abortion goes back to the states where it is supposed to be, and it gets legislated state by state. It never should have become a federal entity at all, and that's one of the things that legalists say about it. Any honest lawyer, I don't care if he's a total pagan, looks at Roe versus Wade and said it shouldn't be in the federal system. It belongs in the state. And Sotomayor says, I don't want to touch it, it's political. No, you fix it. So, in 1993, just to give you an idea how far we've come, in 1993, there was a law that came up between, earlier in 1993, the Employment Division versus Smith. And this came up, and it was a law that the Supreme Court said, they ruled on it. It was a bad ruling. It remained a bad ruling. And why it was a bad ruling was it affected religious rights. And people in Congress and in the Senate and in the presidency started saying, this is affecting religious rights, this employment division versus Smith. We got to do something to countermand that law. They're kind of like the Mishnah, the Jewish people have the Mishnah where they'd make a law and then they would come along and make another law, but that law couldn't rescind that other law. So they didn't have the ability to just go, no, this one supersedes that one. So they came up with a law that would supersede that would get the freedom of religion back in to what the court was doing. And so they did the Freedom of Religious Act, and they sent it in. They sent it in to the Supreme Court to rule on it, and the Supreme Court ruled, but they didn't rule against the standing law of the Employment Division in Smith. Here's where I'm going. The people that pushed it through, the Religious Freedom Act, was a young congressman named Chuck Schumer. Through the Senate, it was directed by Ted Kennedy. And it was signed in law by Bill Clinton. You don't think we are sinking? You don't think things are falling off the end of the earth for us? You think about that. That wasn't all that long ago. That was 1993. So, overturning Roe versus Wade, and the Mississippi law has said, because here's exactly what could happen, and this would be a train wreck. It would be a train wreck if they look at this law in Texas and they look at this law in Mississippi and they make a decision to leave Roe versus Wade there, but also pull in the Mississippi law and pull in the Texas law. And they may get so gummed up in their voting, that's what they decide. That would be a worthless choice. I love the Mississippi law. It's way better than the Texas law because the Mississippi law said you can't make this law unless you deal with Roe v. Wade. Right? And they pose a much stricter argument and did a better job of that argument. And when I think about it, I think about the clear and present danger that is there for us, and that took me to Matthew 12, 43 through 45. When an evil spirit lives in a person, it goes into the desert seeking rest, but finding none. Then it says, I will return to the person I came from. So it returns and finds its former house empty and swept and in order. And then the spirit finds seven other spirits more evil than itself. And they all enter into the person and they live there. And so that person is worse off than before. And that will be the experience of this evil generation. Jesus was speaking a parable to the Pharisees. And he's saying, when you send an evil spirit away from you, you decide, I want to get rid of that wrong, and you push that wrong out of your house, and you sweep your house, but you don't bring anything else in. You don't bring any other morality in. What happens is here comes all these other demons. So now you got a major, major problem, worse than the one before. And the example of that in the pro-life movement is the new battlefield. Because I believe Roe versus Wade will somehow get minimized or defeated. I'm hoping defeated. And boy, will you hear the cry to pack the court when that happens. I can't imagine that Barrett won't come. I can't imagine that Kavanaugh won't come. We now have the court in such a position that I think this is the year. I'm praying that there won't be a 50th year anniversary of Roe versus Wade. Now, they're not going to do anything before June. They're thinking about all this right now. All this is hot and heavy within the Supreme Court because they're not going to do a thing before June. Here's why they're not going to do a thing. Because when they decide what they're going to do and they announce, here's kind of what we're thinking about doing, they're going to do it in June because that's when they go on vacation. And you're going to have all these weeks of arguments and gerrymandering and pushing for position and all that. Then they're going to come back. And the last half of the year, this is going to be hot and heavy. So you know, Satan, I believe, knows that Roe versus Wade's going down. You know how I believe he knows? The abortion pill. The abortion pill poses a far greater danger than Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade has led us to a place where we open up pregnancy centers and we treat the men and women that come in with dignity, and we do sonograms and we talk to them about life and we educate them and they make decisions mostly favorable. And so when you get a mom, I don't care if she's 14, 16, or 23, she sees that baby, it's a different ballgame. That when I was doing the Prestonwood Pregnancy Center, the Planned Parenthood that was over by Houston's restaurant used to send girls over because they were charging how much to do the abortion on how many weeks you were pregnant. And they didn't have a sonogram machine, and they knew we did. And so they would say, we need to know how many weeks you are along. Well, I don't have a sonogram. Well, go over to Prestonwood, their place is right over there on Arapahoe, and they'll give you a free sonogram and just bring it back. Well, when the girl saw the baby, it's a game changer. So I used to write thank you notes to the Planned Parenthood. Thank you for the referral. Appreciate it. We'll be sure not to refer them back. No, I didn't put that in there. I went over there and made a visit one time. And they were all cheery, thanking me. I said, we're happy to, we'll do as many of those as you need done. Just send them. Send them. I think they caught on because they stopped coming. But that's the idea. But the abortion pill takes that out of the equation. Because with the abortion pill, you have to see no one. As a matter of fact, when it first came out, you might remember this. The abortion pill was put into motion, and everybody was talking about it. How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? What an awful thing. And you had to go to the doctor. You had to go to somebody who would look at you. They had to make sure you were no more than 11 weeks pregnant. They had to figure out a lot of things, or you went to some other health provider. Now, all of that has been put aside. They recommend you do that. They recommend you go see a health professional, but it's not required. It's only required because you need a prescription to get the pill. And in just a few states, like in Texas, they won't give you a prescription because we're Texas. But in California, it's a teledoc. Hey, doc, I want one of those pills. Okay, here's your prescription. And if you can't find it in your local neighborhood, or you don't want to get around your local neighborhood, what you can do is there are 3 computer sites out there. And I didn't even put them down. I have them, but there are 3 computer sites out there. And on those computer sites, there are 3 highly advertised websites where women can gather information explaining how to obtain the abortion pill online. Now, what does that mean? That means that online, they can hook up with a doctor in Europe who doesn't see them, but will write a prescription for them, and they'll send a prescription either to India or China. And then the pill will be mailed to you. Now, you can't have it mailed to you if you live in Texas. So you have to have it mailed to you in Oklahoma. You drive up to Oklahoma post office and pick it up. and you take 2 medications. It's a 2-step regimen. You take mifepristol, and you take misoprostol. You take those 2 things. You take one of them, then you wait 24 hours, you take the second one. And at about the 48-hour mark, you will abort your baby right at home. And you'll be the only one there to deal with it. You'll be all alone, for the most part. I'm pretty sure people aren't going to invite people over. Hey, watch this. It's awful. And it's insidious. And it has the possibility of growing so much greater than abortion on demand. So what do you do? What do you do? It's when you get it from China, it might have lead in it. That's the problem with steroids. That's why kids were dying of steroids, because they were getting them from China. Barry Bonds was getting them from Florida. And they were all real nice and clean. You get them from China, they got lead in them. They got bad things in them. You hear about young boys just falling down dead because something happened to their heart. Well, the bad steroid messed up the heart. It's the same thing, same principle. This is bad medicine coming in. It's not checked out by the FDA. Oh, the FDA. Here we go. Dr. Janet Woodcock, FDA, head of the FDA. We've enjoyed her, right? We've seen her on the news. She is massively pro-choice. She has no desire to stop this kind of medicine. Why is this medicine even being built? That's the question now. We have an epidemic of people on pain pills, and they're asking the question, why does that pill even exist? Why didn't the FDA jump in and do something about that pill? So the FDA is now if you're in the FDA, you report to the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Right now, that's Dr. Robert Califf. He's been nominated to run the FDA. And he's getting great support from Mitt Romney. So write Mitt Romney a note. He's been nominated. And right now, Health and Human Services is run by Xavier Becera, Becera, and his assistant. And the assistant has a lot of power in the health the HHS. The assistant has enormous amounts of power. Human Health Services Department. And the person that has been nominated to be the assistant, who does most of all the work, is Rachel Levine. Admiral Rachel Levine. Admiral Rachel Levine is a transgender woman. There was another campaign promise over the Health and Human Resources, who is running the FDA, who has a candidate now who will be in complete compliance with what they're doing. So you see, it's going to be much more when you start talking about medicines and medicines that we allow and medicines that we pass. It's going to get worse and worse. You see why you're praying so hard? See why you just need to get on your face before God and ask forgiveness for your country for what it's done, for the 63 million people that are just gone, generations of people? Government would love for the church to be quiet, to hush up. So I'm going to just give you an idea where to make the most noise. Your prayer closet. Your prayer closet. Psalm 2, 10 and 11. Now then, you kings, act wisely, and be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with reverence and fear, and rejoice with trembling. I mean, just pray it on. Pray it on them. Everybody just, everybody looks at me and says, I look at our government and I look at the people that are running it, and I just can't seem to find a way to pray for them. Pray they get so afraid of God that they begin to understand they got to do something a little different. You pray. You pray, or prayer doesn't mean a difference. Doesn't make any difference at all. If you don't pray, it doesn't make any difference. You can stand up and talk and be eloquent and say things that make a lot of sense, and nobody's going to pay attention to you, because you don't need for other people to pay attention to you. You need to pray. You need to get the heart of God, understand who God is, and understand that He is the one that can change this. And He will change your heart, and you will stand stronger and more bolder than you ever have. And you will speak up when it's time to speak up, and you won't fall apart. Jim Dennison just wrote a book. It's called The Coming Tsunami. And it's about the persecution that is about to come on every God-fearing, believing Christian in America. And if you don't believe it's not coming, you're not watching. You're not paying attention. And when it comes, you better be blood-bought. You better be praying. You better be on your knees. You better be stronger than you've ever been. And I look forward to it, because the church of Jesus Christ is phenomenal. Phenomenal when it's persecuted. And darn near worthless when it's not. So you pray. You just pray. Now then, you kings, call them by name. If you can't remember their name, just say, those idiots in the FDA. Be wise. Be warned. Rule on this earth. Serve the Lord with reverence and fear, and rejoice in trembling. Look forward to the day when God answers that prayer, and you see somebody come forward who's made an absolute mess of whatever it is they've been in, and they go, okay, I think I got that right. Did I get that right? Can we look at it? Can somebody tell me that that's a moral decision? Because I've not made one in so many years. Then 1 Timothy 2, 1 through 4. I urge you, first of all, to pray for all the people and ask God to help them. Intercede on their behalf and give thanks for them. And pray this way for kings and for all who are in authority, so that we can live peaceable and quiet lives marked by godliness and dignity. We got to get godly. We'll never get godly as a nation as long as Roe versus Wade is in existence. So you start praying. You start praying that those Supreme Court justices start making decisions. And in June, when it all starts to start coming apart, you start listening. And you pray harder and harder and harder. And you pray for Justice Barrett. She's brand new. You pray she'll be strong. One of the things that happened in when they heard the argument for the law, for the heartbeat law, when they heard that argument, somebody from the other side was saying, having babies will mess up your ability to continue on your corporate climb, and you will be minimized because you have children. Isn't that a great argument to give to a justice who has 7 kids and is a Supreme Court justice? I don't think that made much sense to her. I mean, she had a lot of kids and then went out and got a couple more. So, understand, our victory comes in the closet first. Begin to pray. Begin to pray like you've never prayed over an issue. Begin to move into what it is God has, because He's there. You heard it sung. He's there. He's there, and His thoughts are for you. His thoughts are for the unborn. And so pray. Pray. That's our invitation. You start right where you are today. You might want to open it up to those justices and just start calling their name out to God and say, make them wise. Make them understand what they're doing. Help them to get it going. Help them to make a difference. And may they operate in fear of God. I tell you, I look at some of the decisions that lawmakers are making, and I think, I'd be so afraid of God to be aligned with that. Might be something I'd even want. But the fear of God comes from us. We begin to pray. So I want you to begin, as you listen to B, begin to pray. Father, help us. Help us to give all that we have to you. Help us to understand that you are the victory, and help us to pray. In Jesus' name.